Okay, so shift happens. Have you guys seen this picture? Now, when it does, a lot of us get sort of disoriented. Some of us tend toward the euphoric, some of us more toward the reactionary, but eventually we regain our equilibrium and realize upon reflection that we're going to need certain skills to get by after this shift. Now, this Partnership for 21st Century Skills has put together a framework to help prepare educators, policymakers, on how to prepare this generation to be the leaders for tomorrow. And educators, we all need to get used to these. We need to learn how to put them into practice in our classroom. But that's not what I'm here to talk to you about. Tonight, I'm going to get medieval on your ass. Okay? Sorry, did I enunciate right? So I did say the word you heard me say, though, medieval. And what I mean by that is not the torture or any of the other things that you might associate with medieval, but more, haven't we evolved beyond that anyway? So the story we normally hear goes something like this. We have the Neolithic agricultural revolution. Jump ahead a bit, we get the Axial Age, we get these great sages popping up all over the world. Focus in a bit on Europe, we have this come to a close with 1,000 years or so of cultural benightedness, during which time we accumulate tons of superstition, what might be called woo in some circles, and when we come to the Renaissance, we sort of slough all that off, and we disentangle ourselves from the morass of medieval malarkey. We're going to come back to this in just a second, but this paves the way for the controlled experimentation of people like Galileo, Newton, who then bring us science. Throw in a bit of tech, we got the Industrial Revolution. We throw in, well, that sometimes leads to problems, but guess what? Tech can solve those. And now we stand poised on the brink of something new and exciting, which is, after the digital revolution and a whole generation of digital natives, well, they're at the helm, so what do we have in store? Well, that's the million-dollar question. There's a group of people out there called the transhumanists, among them Ray Kurzweil of Google, who say that as Neanderthals were to Homo sapiens, so humans today are to post-humans. Now, as with any myth, this is a bit factually dubious, but it does carry with it a great deal of moral weight. And I'm willing to acknowledge that my caricature so far misses a lot of the major points of this narrative of progress. But the point I want to make here is that we're dealing with myth here, okay? So I want to ask you to consider an alternative, and it's not the good old days, which is just a reactionary myth. But what is it? I want us to consider a thought experiment tonight. What was it about the Renaissance that was so inspirational? And if it was so inspirational, isn't it time for another one? So it takes a lot of nerve to throw off 1,000 years of human history. And a couple of the questions we might want to consider as we look at the past 1,000 years is, what are some of the practices that we might want to reject? What are some of the practices, some of the challenges that people were facing 1,000 years ago? What were some of the skills they needed to get by? And what's really surprising about the framework, the P21 framework, is just how medieval it is. Now, let's take a look at some of these things. So if you go back to the green section here, we have the 21st century, or the 3 R's of reading and writing and arithmetic. Well, these map almost directly onto the medieval trivium, quadrivium, of what would have made up the basic and higher level education for any Middle Ages person who could afford it. That another way that this is medieval is that it doesn't divide strictly like the moderns do between theory on the one hand and practice on the other, but it brings these together in ways that make a difference to 21st century themes. We have activist, interventionist inquiry, so learning matters. Now, if we look at the yellow section here, the learning and innovation skills, well, otherwise known as the 4 C's. Well, let's see. We got innovation, check. We got collaboration, problem solving, check. We got communication. I think we're set here. Enough said? Well, when it comes to the life and career skills, or the information and media technology, it is a little bit less obvious how these things map back onto the Middle Ages. But the point to take home tonight is that literacy doesn't mean print literacy, and it really never has. So When you take perennial skills, you add them to new literacies, and you commit to universal education for all, we have ourselves with 21st century skills. Thank you for your time.